and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Writers Toolshed. I'm your host, Richie Belling, and today I am absolutely delighted to be joined by one of the world's best-selling fantasy authors, but it's someone that you may not have heard of before. It's India's fastest-selling author of all time, Amish Tripathi. Amish has found tremendous success in India. Now he's bringing his brilliant books to the West. His wonderful series of books, the Chandra series, have been published by HarperCollins in the UK, all available at the moment. So if you want to dive into something unique, original and fresh, you're going to absolutely love it. I've been absolutely devouring these books, which are Amish's retelling of one of India's most epic ancient stories. The Ramayana predates the Odyssey, Beowulf. It's thousands of years old, and Amish has done a wonderful job of giving his own take, but introducing really interesting things in there that we're going to talk about. Generally, one of the most honest chats about writing I've had. Amish provides some really deep and insightful points on creating characters and how to tackle challenging topics in writing. And Amish is also very honest and open about his challenges when it comes to writing. So I genuinely hope that you're going to enjoy it. Before we get to it, just a quick reminder that if you haven't already done so, to follow or subscribe to the show. We're doing loads more on YouTube now. So if you want to head over there, you can find lots of snippets, different lengths of videos, playlists on like history and psychology. So if you like a more visual experience, then head over to YouTube. If you'd like to support us, one of the best ways you can do that is by sharing the show with anyone you think may be interested, or even just a quick share on social media. Also, giving the show a rating or a review helps us massively. I think we're nearly at 150 ratings on Spotify now. I think you have to do that through the Spotify mobile app. So thank you everyone who has shared that. I think you can also leave comments now as well on Spotify. So yeah, anything that you'd like to share or any requests for episode topics or anything like that, please do get in touch. And if you want to learn even more about writing fantasy or just writing in general, then check out Patreon. We've got writing classes, books, loads of guides. Just published a guide on the passive voice, which is a real thorn in the side for many writers. You can also join our writing community through that too. We've got about half a dozen writing groups, which are meeting weekly, if not bi-weekly. Small groups of, say, 4, 5, 6 people. And basically what a lot of writers want and need to help them progress and polish their stories and get them ready to send to publishers and agents. So if you would like to join one of them writing groups, then head over to Patreon and you can learn more there. I'm thrilled to welcome to the Toolshed India's fastest selling author of all time with over 6.5 million books in print, Amish Tripathi. Amish, welcome.
Thanks, Richie. Absolute pleasure being here. Thank you. And I love that poster, man, on your wall.
Anyone who can't see it, well, it's a podcast, so it's a picture of Rohan. I'll put it on Instagram if you're interested in looking. But thank you so much for joining me. It sounds like you're an incredibly busy guy. Not only do you work as a diplomat, so I can imagine that's quite a full-on job, but you're one of like the biggest selling authors in the world.
I'm a workaholic, so I guess it's good for me. Yeah. I do little else besides work.
I know. Well, it's if you get so much satisfaction out of it, then it doesn't feel like work, does it?
You know, Richie, actually, I know it sounds like a cliche, but if you actually do what you love, you always have the energy, man.
Yeah.
My books, for example, I did my first 2 books while I was still at my previous job. I used to be a banker. I was a banker for 14 years. And I'll apologize for that. I know most people hate bankers. But in my defense, I'm a former banker, not a banker.
Yeah.
But I wrote my first 2 books along with my job. So I used to write, most of my first book was written during my office commutes, actually. I used to write on the backseat of my car.
Oh, nice.
I'm a workaholic, yeah. Boring guy.
Right. You got to get things done, haven't you?
The boring guys get shit done.
Exactly, yeah. And speaking of getting things done, you've got a new book out, The War of Lanka.
So, War of Lanka is the 4th book of the Chandra series, which is my interpretation of the Ramayana. So, those of your readers who don't know, for over 1.5 billion, maybe even 2 billion people in the Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia, the Ramayana is the greatest epic story ever told, right? So it's a story that goes back thousands and thousands of years, far earlier than Zeus or Apollo stories, even earlier than Pharaonic Egypt, right?
That's amazing.
And the stories are alive till today.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, Lord Ram, who's the hero of the Ramayana, is still worshipped to this day. His wife, Goddess Sita, is still worshipped to this day. And the main villain, quote unquote, in the story, Ravan, is still considered to this day in many parts of India, Southeast Asia, as the greatest villain ever. And so my Ramchandra series is an interpretation of the Ramayana. So I don't follow the traditional text. I've reinterpreted a bit. I guess for the Indian youth and Southeast Asian youth,
Yeah. Well, I think before we were recording this, I mentioned that I was watching an interview that you were doing with India Today, and you were getting grilled. There's no better way to put it.
You aren't trying to grill me like that.
You were getting grilled. No, I'm the opposite. But they were quite sort of honing in on a point that because you were sort of writing your version or your interpretation of like these sort of classic Hindu tales and characters, did you sort of anticipate any kind of like negative reaction to that? Because that's what I sort of, I kind of felt like they were challenging you because you'd interpreted like Sita, for example, like she's like a warrior, isn't she, in your story? And I understand like in some interpretations of Sita that she's more like sort of passive. How did you sort of was that a consideration when you were writing it that it could ruffle a few feathers?
No, it's a good point, Richie, because in a way it's like if someone was writing a story on Thor, and imagine if the worshippers of Thor were still here.
Yeah.
Or if you were making the movie on Troy and the worshippers of Apollo were still around, then that scene which Achilles does in Troy, where he beheads the idol, the statue of Apollo, if you remember, just outside the temple. If you've seen that movie, that would obviously be controversial, right? But the worshippers of Thor and Apollo aren't around. The worshippers of Lord Ram, Goddess Sita are still here. But this is one of the points I made in that India Today interview as well. And I think I'll probably say the same thing to you. I have been in this trade for 12 years now. 10 books have been published. And seriously, I would suggest to you or to any of your listeners, Google my name and see if you can find even one controversy around my name.
Yeah.
Not find anything. And that to me is the proof not of any special skill of mine. It is actually proof of how Indians approach things.
Yeah.
See, we are the only pre-Bronze Age culture that is still alive, India. All other pre-Bronze Age cultures, Pharaonic Egypt, Gilgamesh, Mesopotamia, they're all dead. They're museum pieces now. And even later cultures like the pagan Vikings or the Celts, indeed, sadly, they're all museum pieces now. But we are still here, India, the only pre-Bronze Age culture. We still chant hymns that were composed 8,000 years ago. We still worship gods, who our ancestors worshipped 6,000, 7,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And part of the Indian way of life, we are in a way, and we don't call ourselves that, but in a way, I guess we would be called pagans, right? The Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, because we are the ancient way. Right?
Yeah.
And in our way, there is no concept of one truth. And that anyone who doesn't agree with this one truth will burn in hell for eternity. We don't have those concepts.
Yeah. Much more tolerance.
I'm not criticizing that there's a different path of one truth. That's a different way. It's just that in our way, there is no concept of one truth. There's this lovely Sanskrit line, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti, that it's from our most ancient scripture, the Rig Veda. It translates as, truth is one, but the wise speak it as many, right?
Yeah.
So if you actually write our ancient truths with a different perspective, as long as you do it with respect, there's actually never any controversy. And you'll find that there are many who've done it with respect. You'll find no controversies around them.
And
there are people who've done it with disrespect, and you'll find controversies around them. And the key thing is, look, when you read a book, you can just sense it. Has the guy written it with respect or disrespect? You can just sense it. You don't need to be told.
That's a brilliant piece of advice. For anyone who's just like thinking about like tackling something that they're passionate about, but they're uncertain whether they should or they shouldn't, like, just that piece of advice there is just invaluable.
Yeah, I mean, if I, it's not my religion, but if I speak of Christianity or Islam or Judaism, I will always speak with respect. So even if I'm giving some feedback, I've never had any controversy, because even if there's feedback for my own religion, I speak with respect. There's this lovely, thing that I think we've forgotten in the modern day, the value of good manners and speaking with respect. And if you speak with good manners and respect, you'll be surprised how much the other person will be willing to listen to you. But today I notice in an argument, or even if someone wants to say something, it's not that you want the other guy to listen to you. It's more about you want to humiliate the other guy. You want to win the debate.
Yeah. Very adversarial, isn't it?
Yeah. And I find that, sadly, I mean, I don't mean it in a disrespectful way, but I find that in the West, in most of your TV channels, everything, and sadly
it has conflict, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's come sadly into the more elite parts of India, the parts that are more westernized. Like, the interview that you saw of India Today, that interview was in English, so it was a more elite part of India who've also become extremely adversarial. It's not
it's the capitalist way, I suppose, that sort of mentality to step on someone's back to reach up another rung of the ladder. Like, it's I hate it. It really upsets me deeply. But you're sort of stuck in it, aren't you? And you get sort of, I don't know, it is a trap. And I sort of realized that from a very early age, like, you've got things like student loans. So then you have to pay this, you become trapped in this capitalist web of debt and chasing money and stuff like that. And it really, it saddens my soul. But there's not much, like you say, unless you sort of move completely, just give it all up.
The thing is to find balance, Richie. In fact, that's all my books are essentially centered around philosophies that I want to convey, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that you have to swing to the other extreme and there's nobility in poverty. No, I mean, India has seen a lot of poverty. It sucks. It's terrible. But if you swing to the other extreme where everything is about money, that's not good either. Right?
No.
You have to find balance. In everything. Another, wonderful Sanskrit line. I won't tell you the original. It's Ati Sarvatra Varjait. Don't worry, I'll translate for you. It comes from our ancestors. It says extremism of any kind should be avoided.
Nice.
Of any kind. Don't go to any extreme. Divinity is usually in balance. So I'm not going to say, be poor and, there's nobility in that. No, of course not. You need money to, you have bills to pay. You have to take care of your parents. You have to take care of your family. You have to take care of your responsibilities. So be responsible. But don't become so obsessed by it that, like, work shouldn't just be about earning money for you. You should truly enjoy it, man.
Most definitely.
It doesn't feel like work.
Yeah. And that's bringing it back to writing. Is that something that you've always wanted to do, and it's something that has never felt like work?
If you asked my school or college friends, their first reaction on seeing me usually, and they'll say it in Hindi in a much more crude. Hindi is our language, my language, and they'll say it in a much more crude way. They'll say that, tell us the truth, who's actually written those books? Because when I was young, I showed no signs of being creative. Right? I was kind of completely academically oriented. I used to do well in academics. I did my BSc in mathematics. I did an MBA. Joined banking for 14 years, reasonably well-paid job. My last job was as a senior management committee member. So I was following the traditional path because I come from a very humble background, so there's no question of being irresponsible with career choices. And I was very active in sports as well, boxing, gymnastics, those kind of things. I have a slightly crooked nose. It's an old boxing injury. But I never did anything creative. So, my first book, Immortals of Meluha, which was released in 2010, you'll find it hard to believe. It's the first piece of fiction I ever wrote in my life.
Nice.
Seriously, I'd written nothing before that, not even a short story in school. Nothing. I used to read a lot. I was always a voracious reader.
Yeah.
But I never thought I'd be a writer, which is why I love writing so much. It feels like a blessing. Even today, I can't explain where it comes from. It just comes. So
Yeah.
It actually feels like a blessing.
Like a gift that you never knew you had.
And I don't know what I did to deserve it.
Well, I suppose you just go to show like how many you've sold over 6.5 million books. So it's like an incredible impact that you've had on so many people.
Oh, thanks.
And it's like I understand that it was you were originally going to self-publish your first book. Is that right?
In fact, I did self-publish my first book. So it was rejected by every publisher it was sent to. And I stopped counting after some 20 rejections.
Yeah.
Because and I got some pretty detailed feedback from some of the publishers who rejected it. One of them had told me your book is a guaranteed flop.
Really? Are they still in business?
and the guy gave me pretty detailed feedback for why it's a guaranteed flop. So first he said your book is too long, right? It's around 400, 500 pages. And in those days, the kind of books that were sold in India, which were bestsellers, would be campus romance novels, which were normally 100 pages, 120 pages. So he said it's too long. And he said, second, you've chosen a subject that's kind of serious because the youth aren't really interested in religion. Then he said that your storytelling skills are very good. It's a very fast-paced story.
Yeah.
Right? But you keep wanting to get into these philosophy discussions every third, fourth chapter, right? And I kid you not, one of the publishers actually told me this, that if you want the youth to read it, you have to dumb it down. Can you imagine? They actually think this of their own customers, right? So they told me, no, if you want the youth to read it, you have to dumb it down. They can't understand all these philosophies. I'm like, what nonsense is this? So, actually, all of them kind of rejected it. One person was willing to publish, but he told me that I have to remove what he called the Gyan sessions. It's a very derogatory way of saying all these philosophy discussions every second, third chapter. Right?
Yeah.
I said, no, I'm not removing that. That's the purpose of the book, right? It's not just... And if you ask me, the books which truly last for decades are not just airhead stories. They actually have deeper meaning. They actually have philosophy discussions, like Lord of the Rings, like Game of Thrones. You can actually sit and discuss what they mean, and that's what makes it last, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not
you take away from the book.
Yeah, and I'm not saying we don't like fluffy stuff. I love Bollywood movies. Okay.
Yeah.
And Bollywood movies can be accused of many things. Being high IQ, they can't be accused of that. But I enjoy that. But I enjoy, watching thought-provoking Akira Kurosawa movies as well. And why can't one person do both? Right?
Yeah.
And so I actually self-published my first book. And I'm telling you, most of my readers are actually the youth. Right?
Yeah.
And at the lit fest, at events that I have, normally the youth are the ones who ask me the most intelligent questions, right?
Yeah.
I notice the elder people will go into, oh, you put this part of the story from this text which was written 2000 years ago. They go into things like that. Yeah. Whereas the youth will go into what the actual purpose is. You spoke of this philosophy on violence. Is this what you were trying to say? And this is my interpretation. So this thing that the youth are dumb is not true, man.
No. Not at all. It's because they're not given the chance to read books like this.
Yeah, they can enjoy a night at the pub. That doesn't mean they want to be dumb all the time. Right? No. You can have different parts to your character. Right?
Definitely, yeah. Like when we used to go to the pub and talk about philosophical things. Like you can, like you say, you can
There you
drink
go.
and
There
do
you go. And
philosophy.
if you ask me, that is a bias. And it's sad if a publisher has this bias
I
about,
know.
yeah.
I suppose they're very driven by money, aren't they? And they're just sort of what the market. I don't know. It's
Mm.
just you lose a lot, don't you? Like you say, and the reason why your books are so successful and why I'm so excited to read them is because I feel like I'm going to learn something. I'm going to
Oh,
take it away, and it's going to change your life in some way. And that's what you want from books. And the books
yeah.
that I love most are the ones that have done that. So
Yeah. And and see, learning something new doesn't mean it has to be a boring textbook. You can have fun while doing it as well.
yeah,
But only if there's some depth will you actually want to keep going back to that book. Will you want to actually talk about it with your friends?
yeah,
I think that's, and it doesn't matter whether you agree with my philosophies. That doesn't matter. I should at least provoke some thinking in you. That's all. Right?
definitely.
And
So
I think that's my job as an author.
definitely, yeah. So how do you achieve this then? Because I think it is quite a tricky thing for writers to do. So it would be really interesting to hear about your process for approaching this.
Look, there are two parts to it. One is to have enough thoughts and philosophies to think about. So for that, I think you have to read a lot. I read a lot. I read at least 5, 6 books per month, and I've been reading at that pace for decades. And my family, everyone reads a lot, right? I read in
Yeah,
both English and Hindi. Hindi is one of the major Indian languages, or perhaps the most major Indian
yeah,
language. And I like talking to a lot of people. I noticed that, when you actually talk and more importantly, listen to different points of view. So one of the things I try and do is try and meet people who are from a different background than the one I'm from.
yeah.
Because if you're just listening to those who reinforce your existing point of view, you're not learning anything. Right?
No, no,
And you remember those ruts, right? You get stuck in a rut, actually. And
definitely.
the only way you can get out of a rut is actually hearing a different point of view. So even on Twitter, for example, I like to follow people who I disagree with. That's the only way I'll grow, right?
Yeah,
I like to read the books of those I might think, no, I don't really agree with him. But if he's a scholar, he or she is a scholar, I still want to read that book because then I learn something, right?
yeah,
And for all you know, maybe he'll change my mind. He or she will change my mind, right? So you have to try and expose yourself to as many different backgrounds as you can in your own selfish interest, right?
yeah,
Provided that chap, is if he or she is speaking to you is speaking with basic manners. I mean, if a guy is gonna be bigoted with me, then I don't need to listen to the chat, right?
yeah.
But otherwise, I like to hear different points of view. That builds your philosophical kind of bank, if you will.
Does, yeah.
Then this has to be converted into a story, right? And the idea of the story is to convey that philosophy. That I got to tell you honestly, Richie, that's a mystery, man. I don't know how it happens. It just happens.
It
Somehow,
just happens.
I'm telling you, I open the laptop and there's actually a parallel universe that opens up. I've spoken of it many times, and I know some people may laugh at this. I genuinely don't care. This is actually the way it happens with me. It's like this parallel universe opens up, and I just record what I see. And in many
Yeah,
ways, that parallel universe is more real to me than our world. Because in our world, I can't hear what you're thinking, right? I can only hear the words you speak, not the words
yeah,
that you're thinking. In that parallel universe, I can hear the characters' thoughts. I can
yeah.
feel their emotions. I'm like a fly on the wall, but much more than a fly on the wall. I kid you not, I can actually see it, and then I
Yeah,
describe what I see.
that's
Uh,
amazing.
Maybe which is why my books appear so visual. A lot of critics, readers tell me my books appear very visual.
Yeah, I
It's
get that. Yeah, the
it's
description's
because
very vivid.
I am actually describing what I see. They don't come to me as words. They come to me as kind of real life, and I describe what I see.
That's a brilliant way to look at it. I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you say. I was someone like a bit like you, no interest in writing, younger, but read a lot, and then sort of fell into it later in life and just absolutely loved it. And I don't really have much technical understanding of writing and
Uh,
stuff like that. I just sort of feel my way through it, and like you say, transfer the images in your mind onto the paper
yeah.
and into other people's minds. And I don't know. It just feels quite natural, I suppose, doesn't it?
I still, in some ways, it's kind of like the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
But in some ways, Richie, it's like the most difficult thing to do because, frankly, I don't understand how it happens. And
Yeah.
I don't understand why I've been given this blessing. Then you got to understand that somewhere in the back of my mind, there's always this fear shit, this blessing might one day just go away because I
Yeah.
don't know why it has come to me. So I don't know why it'll be taken from me whenever it's taken. Right.
Yeah.
So I have to get as many of my books out while it's still flowing. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is why I like to work so hard because it's, there was no time in my childhood. There's nothing when I showed a build up of these skills. Like it suddenly just started, right?
Yeah.
2005, and I can't explain how it started. I'm seeing these stories.
Yeah.
So which is why I love it so much. Also, in some ways, it's like it feels like really a spiritual experience. But in some ways, there's always that fear at the back of the mind. God knows when it'll stop, right? So I better write as much as I can before it stops.
Yeah. And speaking of your stories, then what about the War of Lanka? Because this sounds like the way you've built up to it. I really sort of admire because it's three. The three preceding books are from three separate characters, aren't they? And it's their stories are linear, and it all builds up into this one final book.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell us all about
there's
it.
this. Have you seen Rashomon, Akira Kurosawa's movie?
No, I've not seen it. I've heard of it though.
Yeah. Oh, you should see. So there's actually a term called Rashomon effect, right?
Yeah.
So it's a classic, man. Akira Kurosawa, one of the finest filmmakers ever. So you see the same story, and it's kind of revealed in parts from three different perspectives: the perspective of the samurai, perspective of his wife, and the perspective of the robber, right? And you are so convinced by each person's point of view when you're seeing it,
Yeah.
right? And by the end, you don't know what the truth is, right? And then which gives rise to a thought in your mind that what is the truth, right? There are facts which are, unambiguous, but our interpretation of those facts or stringing together of those facts into a story is completely by our bias, by our background, by our perspective, right? So,
Yeah.
The British will see Winston Churchill in a particular way, as they should. I don't grudge them that. Indians will see Winston Churchill in a very different way, right?
Yeah.
Because same set of facts, but different backgrounds, different perspectives. So I thought that the thing with the Ramayana, the traditional Ramayana, it essentially goes with the perspective of Lord Ram, the God,
Yeah.
right? The very word Ramayana translates as the journey of Ram. But there are three main characters who drive this story forward. One is, of course, Lord Ram, the god, and then his wife, goddess Sita, and then the quote-unquote villain, Ravan, right? And I thought that if we can get the perspectives of all three characters from their birth to the incident which brings these three characters together, you can understand why they are the way they are. Right?
Yeah.
And then you get a much deeper understanding of why the story is going the way it's going, right? So hence Ram sign of Ikshvaku is from the birth of Lord Ram to the kidnapping of goddess Sita. Sita, warrior of Mithila, is from her birth to her kidnapping. And Ravan, enemy of Arivarta, is from the birth of Ravan to when he kidnaps goddess Sita. And then War of Lanka is from that common incident onwards when Sita is kidnapped by Ravan and Ram has to fight a war to free her. So War of Lanka, you've understood all three previous stories. And War of Lanka is obviously, it's a war, so there's a lot of violence in there. Stylized violence.
Yeah.
But
two big battles.
Essentially, you get a deeper understanding of why the story is happening the way it's happening.
Yeah.
And what we've done, what Harper has done very nicely out here is, you can read the book as an independent book, and the summary of the first three books is actually there on the Harper website, and they're sharing it with you.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
So you can get straight in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the way you've written it though, like when I can imagine by the time you're reading that fourth book, you care about each character so much. it must just be a bit torturous because you don't know who to root for. But
But
yeah,
that's what makes
it's a
you
really good
enjoy the story
idea.
much more, right?
Yeah, you got to
You don't
care
have,
about the characters.
yeah, you don't have to actually like the character. You may hate the character also, but you have to care about the character. You have to care.
Yeah,
You have to be intrigued by that character. Then you learn something from that character.
yeah. Have you got
Like
any?
Ravan as a character, the quote unquote villain, why he fascinates me so much. He's not just a thug, right? Anyone can be a thug. Okay. And of course, he's an extremely violent man, very short tempered, and massive anger management issues, massive ego. But he's also a scholar, right? He's a brilliant scholar. He's a
Yeah,
brilliant musician. He's a good administrator. So his kingdom is actually run very well, right? But he has no control over his desires. I mean, if he wants a woman, he wants a woman, right? If he's drinking away, he'll keep drinking away, right? And his capability is what makes him a very fascinating character. He's not just a thug, right?
yeah.
And then you need a hero who's as, even more powerful than him to be able to defeat Ravan. I think that's what makes the story fascinating to me.
Yeah. No, it's brilliant. I love switching the perspective to the other side. Because it's not always like the story that interests me the most is when the bad guy is not quite bad.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of perspective, isn't it? And
And
it's
and
so
look at
effective.
and even Ravan, the way he became, if you understand why he became the way he became,
Yeah,
then even though you know his actions aren't right, you can understand why he got there. Right?
yeah,
And I think, like one of the things which got me, and this was actually one of my younger readers had told me this, that both the god Ram and the villain Ravan, both of them suffered greatly through their lives, right? Both of them suffered. But
yeah,
their reaction to their suffering was very different. Ram, the more he suffered, the more noble he became. His attitude was, I will give to the world what the world didn't give to me, right? If the world was unfair to me, I will be even more fair to the world, right?
yeah,
And that's what made him different. And Ravan's entire thing was the world is unfair to me. I will freaking burn the world down. And what my younger reader told me is actually both of them suffered. It's their reaction to their suffering which makes them who they are. And it was such a wise statement. And that kid must have been a college kid. And he
yeah,
said, who doesn't suffer in this world? All of us suffer, right? So which means it's in our hands, yeah, how we react to our suffering. Who escapes grief? All of us. All of us have sadness. Who doesn't it?
yeah.
The way we react to it defines the kind of lives we will lead. And it's
That's
such
a
an insightful
brilliant
thing to
point.
say.
Yeah, it's a brilliant point.
Yeah.
And it's a great idea for your characters as well. So, have you been able? Have you got any sort of tips to share that for creating characters? You had such brilliant success. So have you got any insights?
Because actually I can't give a logical flow for how it comes. The stories just kind of open up. One of the things I've seen in life is you actually in your heart have to believe these characters are real. And you can't convince yourself. It has to actually kind of, it's like you can't convince yourself to be in love. You're either in love or you're not in love, right? There's no logical flow, right? You take these 5 steps and you'll fall in love. It doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing with characters. I think if you actually believe they are real, then they will open up and tell you more about them.
Yeah.
And then you kind of record what you see. That's the first thing. Second thing, one of the things I've seen is every person I meet is in some way material for some or the other character, right? Because what makes a character real? Some tick that stays in your mind, so I keep trying to observe people and, and just keep it in the back of my mind, and it goes in some character which makes a character real. Like, let me give you an example. There was this friend of mine who I knew in my banking days, and she had come to. So I'm talking about maybe I don't know 15 years ago. No, 16 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And she had come to talk to me for some advice, some property dispute she was having in her family, right? And the point wasn't the property dispute. The point was when she was talking to me, whenever she would get really troubled, she had a chain, a gold chain, and she had a symbol of her god out here, right? And whenever she would get really, hanging as a pendant, whenever she would get really troubled, she would just hold a pendant. Okay, and if she got more trouble, she'd hold it very tightly, and she wouldn't even notice it that she would just keep on talking. And when she'd calm down, she would just kind of let her hand go and keep it down. And I know why that remained in the back of my mind. And then when I was writing Ravan, okay, this take came back, right? That Ravan holds a pendant of 2 fingers, essentially, the bones of 2 fingers of someone very important, right? And whenever he gets, Ravan, the villain, whenever he gets really troubled, his hand instinctively just goes out to the pendant of those 2 fingers, which to anyone else appears very macabre, right? It's like the fingers. And he just holds it tightly, right? And when he calms down, it just comes down. Now, this is a minor take, but what it does for you as a reader makes the guy more real, right? So one of the things I always advise to authors, keep observing, keep listening. You have to be like a sponge. Don't just be in your room. Go out, meet people. Every character you meet makes your character more real. But more importantly, actually in your mind, you have to believe that these characters actually exist in a parallel universe. Then they'll start opening themselves to you.
That's brilliant bit of advice. Thank you very much for sharing. Taking more of a natural approach, isn't it? Like, let the world inspire.
Yeah.
And the amount of characters, like exactly that. I used to live right by a park, and you'd always just like meet people, chat to them for a little bit, and you would get character ideas and
just listen.
And it's amazing, like some of the people you meet, they would be a brilliant character in a story, and you want to go and write a story for them.
I get what you mean, man. And and the only way you can do this, is that if as an author you don't have this arrogance that I am the creator, it's all my genius. You actually have to have that humility that actually it's the world that's inspiring you. It's what you're reading that's inspiring you. It's the divine that's blessing you. Have that humility. Kind of write with the humility of a witness, not with the arrogance of a creator, right?
Definitely,
And just keep watching, listening, and it just comes. It'll come to you.
Yeah. Do you try and include or like sort of highlight things in your stories that you're passionate about? Because I know you mentioned before about colonialism, and when I was sort of reading around this before our interview, it was something that came up, and it's something I really admire, because not enough people really speak about the truth of colonialism, and especially in this country. Like, I was brought up, and everyone was going, "Oh, the grand old days of the empire," and I mean, you've lived over here for a few years, and it's just like characters like Jacob Rees-Mogg. So it's just like, and I find it really frustrating because it's just not the truth. And so have you found yourself like wanting to shed like the realities of these kind of things in your stories?
Yeah, Richie, I mean, look, there are things which drive me, things which I feel passionately about, like women's rights, for example, or I have gay characters, in one of my books. I have, speaking against casteism, for example. But yes, colonialism as well, because and the experience of those who suffered colonialism was really terrible. Tens of millions of Indians died in famines that were largely man-made, by the colonial rulers.
They were, especially like my family from Ireland, and that was a man-made
Ireland suffered the potato famine. So in fact, I don't know how many Irish are aware. Many Irish actually supported the Indian freedom struggle, by the way. Because they saw it as a common thing. Now, it's not just that. I mean, Angus Maddison, who was a British economic historian, had recorded, and his data showed that for most of human history, actually India was actually the wealthiest land on earth. For all of the first millennium common era, India contributed around 35% of the world's GDP. To give you a sense of perspective, today US contributes 25% of the world's GDP.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Till as late as the 17th century, India contributed around 24% of the world's GDP, 17th century, not too far back. By the time the British Raj was over, India's contribution to global GDP was 2%.
That's it was just getting sucked out of the country.
Like I said, tens of millions died in man-made famines, and various things happened, terrible things. But one of the things I say on this, and I say this as a very proud Indian, that we must speak the truth of what happened, but there is no need for any hatred today. I'll tell you what I mean, that today's British have not done anything. So there's no need to hate. That is wrong. This concept, I'm not a supporter of the concept of community guilt or historical guilt. That's unfair.
Yeah.
But swinging to the other extreme, where I say, no, nothing happened and the Raj was something wonderful. No, that's not true. It was terrible, right? It was terrible for those of us who suffered it. And we must speak the truth of it. But like I was saying at the beginning, right? With manners and with politeness. There's no need to, engender hatred against someone today.
Yeah.
Just because that person happens to be the grandson or the great-grandson or the great-great-grandson of someone who may have done something, that's the sins of the father should not be visited upon the son. That's not right. Yeah. But we must speak the truth of it. So essentially what I'm trying to say once again is what I said earlier. Find balance. Speak the truth of what happened. We can't live in this make-believe world that the empire was something good. No, it wasn't. It was terrible.
Yeah, definitely.
It may have been good for the UK. It was terrible for us in India. We suffered and many parts of the world. In Africa, everywhere else. But there is no need to hate someone today for it. That is wrong. So essentially finding that balance, I think, is extremely critical.
Yeah. That's a brilliant explanation.
Thank you.
Do you, this is a question I always ask authors when they come on, is do you ever or do you still encounter challenges when you write?
Oh man, I'm kind of lucky. I just open the laptop and it just starts.
Yeah.
And I've written some 10 books in 12 years and 10 reasonably, I mean, they tend, and you can read them fast. They're not, I hope they're not long reads, but they are 400, 500 pages. So they are like how fantasy books would be. There was only once in my life where I faced a block that was for a period of 2-3 months. I've had a very difficult time in my personal life the last 7-8 years. Things are kind of stabilizing now.
Yeah.
And the career kept going better and better, but on the personal life, there were loads of challenges. I lost people in my family, in my immediate family, some very tragically. I was very disturbed.
Oh,
and we're a very close-knit family, so it was very, very disturbing, very troubling. And there was this one phase when it was probably the lowest point of my life. I was writing Ravan at that time. That is the book prior to War of Lanka. And Ravan as a book itself is quite dark because the character is dark. And I happened to be at my lowest phase in my personal life at that time. And for 1-2 months, the writing also, like I would open the laptop and nothing would come.
Yeah.
And I was like, shit, even this has gone now. How much worse can life get? Because for me, at that real, you can't imagine what I was going through at that time. I was, if even this blessing is gone like shit, then what's the point of living? And how actually I came out of it was, through a song. My twin brother and I, and you know how men become when we are too depressed to do anything. We just, we don't want our brain to think anything.
Yeah.
So Ashish, my twin brother, and I, we were just watching TV and randomly just surfing. This is how, I guess, this is how men become. We weren't even watching anything, and both of us were just not in a frame of mind to do anything.
Yeah.
And he was just randomly surfing, and he stopped at, there was one song which suddenly just came up, and I told Ash, just stop. And I heard that song. For some reason, it connected, and I downloaded it on my phone.
Yeah.
And I went down for a walk that evening to the park close to my building. And my app, the music app, how it works is if you don't switch on a particular playlist, it just starts with whichever song you downloaded last.
Yeah.
Which was the song that I just downloaded. It was a Hindi song. And the first 10 bars, it was just music. I started listening and I just started crying.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even listen to the full song. I was just listening to that beginning again and again and again and crying continuously and walking in that park for an hour.
Yeah.
And like the next 3-4 chapters just came down in a rush.
It's like the sort of unblocking the river, isn't it?
I guess. And then I immediately went back up and I wrote that. I think it's probably among the best chapters I've ever written in my life. It was.
Yeah.
But it was Ravan also at his angriest at that time. And I still can't hear that song without tearing up. So I don't like listening to that song now.
It's amazing how like different creative things can just inspire you in all different ways, isn't it? Yeah.
And there's no logic to it, no, Richie. I think that's what makes if you're doing anything creative, that's what makes it so wonderful. It's not about the others. It's about giving your soul some peace.
Yeah.
I think that's what creativity does.
Definitely, yeah. Like the therapeutic side to it.
In some ways, yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Last question to finish on. Have you got any tips for anyone who's thinking about writing a book for the first time?
I am both a left brain and right brain kind of guy, right? So I believe in being creative and pragmatic at the same. Like I said, I come from a humble background.
Yeah.
So take my advice with that background, right? Because I have tons of blessings from my parents, but I don't have any property from my parents. I've had to be responsible and build everything from my own.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I always say is when you're writing, write with your heart. Don't care two hoots about what readers will think, critics will think, whether you'll get famous, whether you'll get money. Because if your aim is to make money or become famous, there are other much easier routes, trust me, than writing. Don't do this for that, right? It has to be the voice of your soul. It has to be something you're doing for yourself.
Yeah.
Right? That has to be the first thing. This has to be pure, right? Which brings me to the second connected point, that you can keep your writing pure, but something needs to pay the bills, right? And if you can't pay the bills, you'll be forced to compromise on your writing, right?
Yeah.
To pay the bills. So have a job on the side. There's no dishonor in that. I wrote my first 2 books along with my job, the banking job.
Yeah.
And 24 hours is really a hell of a lot. Stop wasting time on other shit. There's 24 hours is really a lot. You can find the time to hold down a job and write. I did that. I used to write on the backseat of my car. There's enough time. Don't waste time on other stuff. Then the third thing is, once you've written your book, don't think that it sells by itself. It doesn't work that way. You have to be, for the want of a better term, almost schizophrenic. When you're writing your book, be completely pure to your soul. When you're promoting, become a practical, pragmatic marketing guy.
Yeah.
Right? You have to know how to promote it. Nothing sells by itself. And don't expect others to do it for you. Why should they? A publisher has hundreds of other books to push as well. I mean, so you gotta fight for your attention, right? Even as one of my bosses had told me once, even a mother only gives food to the child when he starts crying, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, exactly, even your mother who loves you so much, she will also ignore you if you're not crying. So I don't mean literally crying, but you have to push your case.
You do, yeah.
If you're not doing that, it's not going to sell by itself. So essentially 3 different things. Writing, be completely creative, care 2 hoots about anyone else. Have a job, be pragmatic. Use your left brain at that time. And third, make sure you market properly. Nothing sells by itself.
3 fantastic tips. Bit of everything, like you say, creative, pragmatic, and getting results. Amish, thank you so much. It's been one of the best chats I've ever had, I think, on this podcast. It's been very honest, very open.
Thanks, Richie.
I really appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Richie. Thoroughly enjoyed this. We must stay in touch.
Most definitely, yeah. I'd love to have you back on because I'm sure we've got lots more to talk about. If anyone would like to find out more about you and your books, where's the best place to look?
So I am on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, @author Amish, AUTHORAMISH. And you can come to my website as well, which is also authoramish.com. AUTHORAM, M for mango, ISH.com.
Nice. I'll put all the links in the description as well. Well, Amish, thank you so much. And yeah, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you so much, Amish. It was a really brilliant chat, and I just loved how honest and open you were in that interview. And I hope listening at home, you appreciated that too, and you've learned something new to help and inspire you with your own writing. I've included links in the description if you'd like to learn more about Amish and his brilliant books. Do honestly check out the Chandra series. The front cover carries the quote back from the BBC: Amish is India's Tolkien and Asia's Paulo Coelho. And I have to completely agree. As Amish discusses it in our chat there, or discussed in our chat, there's a lot of philosophical things in there, and you feel like you learn something, and you grow as you read the book. You take something away, and that's the kind of fiction I absolutely love, and that's the kind of fiction I love to write. Not sure if I always achieve it, which is why I always asking Amish for advice there. So thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe or follow to stay up to date with some cracking new episodes we've got coming out in the next few weeks and months. We've been interviewing some fantastic authors. We've got an interview coming up with Juliet E. McKenna, who has got a fantastic new book coming out in April called The Cleaving. I also got an interview coming up with the Hugo nominated author Daniel Polanski. We've got a two-part series on magic systems, and we're going to be discussing hard magic systems, soft magic systems, and how to create your own, plus looking at lots of examples from the fantasy genre. And Yanina Arndt and Lucy Atkinson from the Fae Fellows podcast will be joining me for them too. So yeah, be sure to follow and subscribe so you don't miss any of them. If you really like the show and you'd like us to do even more, you can support us by sharing this episode with anyone you think may be interested, or on social media. Or give us a rating on Spotify mobile app if you enjoyed that, or a review on iTunes. And head over to our Patreon page where you can find lots of writing tips, guides, writing classes, books, interviews, and a little bit of merchandise. Plus, you can also sign up for a tier where you get a one-to-one session with myself once a month. So if you've got any stories that you'd like a bit of help with, then check out that offer as well. That is all for today. Thank you so much, as always, for listening. We'll be back on the 28th of March with a brand new episode. And until then, keep on scribbling.